Jon Bannan. I appreciate you being here, man.
I'm excited for it. Let's do this thing.
Cool, cool. I'm glad to have you. I've been following you for a while. Love your work. Love what you've been doing. And like I mentioned a little while ago, just recently figured out that you were into music and I found it very fascinating and want to dive into that at a certain point in the conversation. But let me start off and give you an intro for the audience,
All right.
everybody that's listening and or watching. Jon Bannan, you are an illustrator, designer, and a musician based in Richmond, Virginia. You specialize in apparel design, vintage typographic badge work, and illustrations inspired by traditional Americana and Japanese tattoos. You're the founder of No Ghost Story Studio, where you deliver custom, never pre-made designs, embodying the philosophy of telling your story now to avoid future regrets. You've been a collaborator with renowned clients such as Morgan Wallen, Ernest, Samuel Adams, Chris Stapleton, Sullen Art Collective, Tatami Jiu-Jitsu, and many more, showcasing your versatility and appeal across various industries. And most recently, you've stepped into a collaborative role with Logo Lounge as a motivational ambassador. That's very telling about who you are as a person to be able to be recognized like that. One of the things that I wanted to start off with, just like I said, it's the only scripted question I have, and that is, where were you born and what was life like as a kid for John?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great place to start. I feel like a lot of our creative processes start where we're born. I'm from Charlottesville, Virginia, so I grew up in the countryside in the woods. We didn't really have a farm. You can't really call it a farm. We just had a few horses, some chickens. I took care of chickens when I was a kid. A
Cool.
lot of hard work, a lot of just running around in the woods and big imaginations, big dreaming. When you have 20 acres of just woodlands that you can ride horses on and act like you're in Lord of the Rings or whatever, like your imagination just runs wild. So I grew up in a family that really put arts forefront and pretty much everything. Art and music was a huge part of my childhood. Sports, not so much. My family wanted to have weekends to do things as a family, so we didn't do sports, and instead we did theater and we did music and we did art and design classes, stuff like that. And it also helps that I was homeschooled. I like to think that I came out as a pretty normal person despite the fact that I was homeschooled. But yeah, it was homeschooled all the way through, like most bored homeschool kids. I found Microsoft Paint at some point and started dabbling in Paint and was like, this is fun. You can make art on the computer. And at some point, our family had a friend over who was a graphic designer, and my dad was like, John, show him some of your stuff on Paint. And I was like, okay. Showed him some of my stuff, and he goes, if you actually had the right tools, you could probably be pretty good at this. And I kind of checked it away in the back of my mind. I was like, could be graphic designer maybe someday. And I was
Yeah.
like, no, I wanna play violin, I wanna be a musician, I wanna tour, I wanna do that kind of thing. And went to Texas, did like an internship in music down there for a while, and that was when I was 17, and then came back to Virginia and got my bachelor's degree in graphic design and moved out to Arizona. And I started working with an agency out there that taught me just a lot about the business side of design and how to and how not to run a business in design and interacting with clients and all of that. And from there, moved back to Virginia and worked on starting No Ghost Stories. And you kind of mentioned No Ghost Stories a bit in the intro, but I always have a backdoor approach to most things, which is I think why like my creative process is the way that it is. I try to look at the problem and then come at it from a very different angle to see how we can accomplish things that people haven't necessarily thought of before. So the title No Ghost Stories, if you're wondering, the studio being No Ghost Stories is a backwards title in that I don't want people to not tell their stories and then to later regret them, and those regrets becoming ghost stories of their life that then they're like, oh, I could have possibly promoted my design, like my ideas through graphic design, but I didn't. And my brand never took off, my business never took off. And I want to empower people through graphic design to pursue their dreams and to pursue their business ideas and their plans so that they don't have to look back and see their regrets as ghost stories. So
Yeah.
the title for No Ghost Stories.
That's a beautiful mission. That's a beautiful mission. Were your parents creative at all?
They're both very creative. My dad actually was a radio DJ for 15 years, so if I
Okay.
can thank my dad for anything, it's giving me the golden voice. So I try to,
You do have a good voice.
I
You could
appreciate
do
it. Yeah.
plenty of voiceover work.
I've actually been debating that on the idea of creative endeavors.
Yeah,
I've been looking into voiceover work. I feel like it'd be really fun and just a natural thing is I've always loved acting. I've always loved voice talent. I feel like it could be a really cool thing to do.
for sure.
But yeah, so my dad was radio DJ for a very long time. He got his degree in broadcasting from Central Michigan, and
Oh, wow.
like he's
Chips. Go
been doing it
Chips.
for a long time. Yeah, exactly. So very creative in that. My mom, she homeschooled me and my two older sisters, so very creative in that. She grew up pretty musical as well. And then my middle of us three, the middle sister, she still teaches piano and is very involved in that. So a very musical family. We were all learned piano early on. I was too interested in Legos to really make piano click, and then picked up violin and guitar. And like just this year, getting back into piano, I'm like, I've been producing for 6 years now. I should know how to play piano since so much in production is MIDI based and piano based. I was like, it's music. I know how this stuff works. I really should just sit down in front of a piano and figure it out again. So that's my like current musical endeavor is like actually figuring out piano now that I'm almost 30 and no longer easily distracted by Legos. I'm like, I can actually figure this out now. I need to
Right.
give this a shot.
Nice. Nice. Very cool. So with having the two older sisters and you being the third child, usually the third child is the most sensitive one. The one that's
Or the one that gets away with the most, depending on how you look at
could
it.
be that too. Yes, definitely. The baby experience where you're looked at as the one that needs to be given the most or had the most opportunity type scenarios. The oldest child's usually the one who has to be the third parent.
The first pancake, as they call it.
Yeah, middle child is usually the one that's doing whatever on their own. They just go their own way, kind of a thing.
Yeah,
With that experience of having a lot of land, not necessarily a farm, as you said, but having a lot of land and a lot of room to explore as a kid, how much of that influenced your creative thought process?
I think that it's pretty foundational, and maybe something that I've been realizing lately is that I just need to get into nature more. I
Yeah.
try to surround myself with plants and
Yep.
like natural living things,
Yeah, I love
but
it.
when it comes down to it, I'm like, I feel like I just need to be outside more. And I'm actually debating getting like a camper van, sprinter van, home on wheels kind of thing. And I'm like, I work freelance pretty much. I can work from wherever. Why am I not like being more nomadic and being in nature and driving places? I love traveling, being homeschooled. We did lots of field trips, lots of homeschool trips all over the country, just like going to battlefields and historic sites and exploring and learning like hands-on. So I got a travel bug from very early on, and I'm sure that being on a chunk of land that had a lot of woodlands that you could just explore also cultivated that traveling, the exploration kind of side of me. In the last few years, I've been like, I'm feeling a little boxed in by society and buildings. I think
Yeah.
I need to get back out into nature. But the plants definitely help. My dad in college, he said him and his roommate had 90 plants at some point in
Oh,
their dorm
wow.
room. And I was like, you guys, like, you sure you weren't smoking weed at all? And he's like, no, we didn't do weed. I was like, it sounds kind of like that's exactly what you'd expect from people that would. But I had just tons of plants, love plants. Growing up, we always had lots of plants in the house. So it's something that I definitely feel like I connect to nature. And maybe it's just like that Irish, Celtic side of
Heritage.
me that wants to
Yeah.
be heritage that wants to be like more connected to the land. So I think that's definitely a fair point. And like my inspiration for sure comes from that kind of groundedness and that kind of natural connection.
Nice. Nice. Were your older sisters, were they creative as well at all? Or
Yeah. Yeah, we were all very creative. We all, like I said, learned piano growing up, so we're all very involved in the kind of musical side of things. I think that they're both married and have families and have lots of kids, and I'm the unmarried one without kids. So I feel like I've embodied the I'll be the free spirit creative one. You guys are living a little more expected kind of lives. They both wanted to have lots of kids, so I'm like, you guys want to do that? That's great. I just want to make as much stuff as I can in as many
yeah,
different spaces as I can and be as good at as I can't speak as
that's
good.
all right.
Wow, that's a tongue twister. Can't
You're
be
good.
as good at it as I want to be. So. That's my endeavor is just to tackle as many creative spaces as I can and just to make as long as I can.
Yeah, no, I think ultimately creatives have the ability to pivot alternatively into other avenues of creativity. And a lot of times I think some get, especially in graphic design, I've seen it across the board that sometimes graphic design puts you in a box, so to speak. And especially if you're working for a company or an agency, you get to a point where you feel like that's the only thing you can do is that thing. But one of the things that I've been able to do, even with my graphic design skills, other than just being a natural artist, is being able to see opportunities to pivot into different industries,
Mm,
going into the fashion industry, going into the jewelry industry, working with musicians and different things in that industry, seeing different aspects of film industry or TV that I've been able to do stuff in. So a lot of times I try to point that out for people. And then also too with the coaching that I'm starting to doing is if somebody's having a struggle like that, is being able to say, hey, let's see what body of work looks like that you've done so far. And let's see if there's another avenue that you can step into that might just fill your heart with joy and change everything for you.
totally. Yeah. I
So
think that's the great part about being creative people is that it's all connected. Like in one way or another, all of the artistic stuff, the creative spaces are very connected. And I think as much as technology is evil, like the good parts of it and the good parts about social media is that we are more connected now in our creative pursuits. Like I feel like back in the day, it used to just be like you are Beyonce, you are Adele, like you are the single creative person at the pinnacle of your game, and that's it. But nowadays, you see artists are all collabing with each other. They're all working with each other. Lots of designers will hire other designers to help them with projects, and they'll go into things together. And I feel like that interconnectivity is so powerful and such a blessing as part of the social media landscape that we live in today, being able to bring people together, do things like this where we can have conversations between two creatives and spread it out to the other creatives that exist in the world. It's like nothing has to be isolated. You don't have to be an island anymore. You don't have to be the one person, but you can be interconnected. You can see somebody in a different corner of the industry and say, I like what you're doing. How do you do that? And learn from it. And I think that's the important thing is just always being able to learn and always being open to continuing to grow. I think those are very important things that maybe we take for granted nowadays. Back in the day, I feel like artists were so much more the starving artist stereotype.
yeah,
Like you were the only person, you had your vision, you were misunderstood. And now
yeah,
we're like, oh, there's a lot of people out there that are also struggling with things that can help you through it. And either they've struggled with it and they're past it and they can give you advice, or they know people, or you can collaborate. It's just really beautiful that we live in this time and space that people can be so much more involved in each other's processes and help each other out in that way.
yeah, definitely, definitely. It's definitely a different world, and the ability to connect is even easier at this point if you're willing,
Yeah.
right? A lot of times you feel like you have to deal with it on your own and you're alone with it, or you just feel that way based off of what that emotion is doing to you internally. You feel like there's no way that anybody will understand what I'm dealing with, but that's not always true.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's somebody else out there that feels exactly the same way, almost in the same moment, even.
Yeah, exactly. We're more
So,
connected than I think we know we are.
yeah, yeah. With being homeschooled, was it a faith-based curriculum or was it just a generalized?
Yeah, it was a faith-based curriculum. It was a co-op that I went to, so it had 300 families. So it was bigger than some of the private schools in the area. But I
Okay.
think it was Wednesdays. So once a week on like Wednesday, we'd all go into this co-op, and many of the parents of students there that had a degree in, say, like some kind of science field would do like biology one or biology two to be broken up across the teachers and the parents that were at the part of the co-op. So
Yeah.
I would say it's like I was homeschooled and spent most of my time throughout the week working on my own stuff or having my mom help me with things. But one day a week we'd have a private school more or less.
Yeah.
And that I feel like was what probably socialized me more than most homeschoolers get. Just being able to be around a lot of people and a lot of students.
Yeah.
And it was still small. Like I think my graduating high school class was like 14 people. So it wasn't big by any means, but in the overall scheme, it was a lot of people in a relatively big co-op organization.
Yeah, the reason I asked is because I'm a bit familiar with that. I went to elementary school up through fourth grade was public school, and then my parents shifted and put me into a private Christian school. So I understand the layout of how that works and how that looks. With those Wednesdays where you would go to the co-op and you would be around all the other students, were there opportunities at that point for you to be able to connect with certain ones where it was like a continual thing where, oh, we're looking forward to next Wednesday because I'll get to see these friends that I've got made here.
Yeah, exactly. It's like between like church and youth group, co-op was like my time for socializing with people. So it was like you had consistent class members. Everybody that was in the class like was going to be there on a Wednesday unless they were sick or traveling or whatever. So throughout my growing up through the co-op, definitely had a lot of friends that stayed consistent throughout the entire space of it.
Cool, very cool. And was there any others within that environment too that you saw were creative as well, to where you had a little bit more of a connection to them, or was it not a lot of that opportunity?
We had a number of art classes throughout. I think that every year that I was there, I took an art class of some kind, and there were a lot of people in the classes that were also creative. I can't off the top of my head say any of them that are still creative. I think even in my violin class, I'm the only person that I know of that still plays violin throughout it. And then, like I said, I graduated class of 14 people, so it's a pretty small pool that we're talking about here.
Yeah.
But yeah, throughout schooling, art classes were always my favorite. Always just getting through the day until I could get to the point that I could go to art class and make whatever we were making. And yeah, really good memories of just like creating stuff. And teachers would always say, try to make this or this is your focus. And like I said, with the backdoor approach to everything, I'd always hear what the prompt was and try to find a really obscure corner that was like, I'm still doing what you wanted me to do.
Yeah, yeah,
It's as different of a concept as I could possibly come up with in like creative writing classes or whatnot. They'd say, this is your prompt, this is your research paper. And I'd be like, okay, if this is the topic, how can I narrow this down to a really weird angle and come at it from that angle so that I can stand out? And it's always been, I think, a strange habit of mine to try to find the ways that I can stand out and just like a not trying to stand out, but trying to do things differently from how other people naturally do them. Like when
yeah,
I started learning guitar, a friend showed me a couple of like chords on guitar, and I was like, "This is fun," but I could play left-handed, and that way, when I'm on stage, everybody knows that I'm different because I'm playing
right.
left-handed. I was like, that could be an easy way of just like standing out, and I don't know like how that mentality came to be in my head that like, I had to find ways to be different.
Yeah,
It's always been a natural like approach of mine to try to figure out how I can come at things from a different angle so that I'm not like having to shout like I'm different, but letting it naturally speak for itself through the process of people seeing it, being like, I wouldn't have thought to do it that way, but it works.
yeah.
Yeah, why not?
Very cool. So are you right-handed naturally then?
This is the confusing thing, and where lots of people get confused with the process is that my mom says when I started writing, I picked up the pencil left-handed. And she went, put it in my right hand, and she was like, it'll be easier for you this way. And I just rolled with it.
Got you.
So, like, hypothetically, you
You're
could make,
ambidextrous?
yes, I'm ambidextrous, but I can still paint left-handed, but
Uh-huh.
I'm far more motor skill accurate right-handed, but I'm left eye dominant, but I shoot rifles left-handed and pistols right-handed. I shoot pool left-handed and I bat right-handed. I mean, it's all over the place. Like my aim is awful because I'm left eye dominant, and if I try to shoot in anything, then I'm overcorrecting. It's
Yeah.
weird. It's like
Yeah.
there's a reason that I'm not great at like hand-eye coordination because my eyes and my hands are all kinds of messed up.
That's fascinating. That's
Yeah.
very fascinating.
Also, why I stayed away from sports and was just like, I'm good at music and art. I'll
Right.
stay. Can't throw accurately to save my life.
Yeah, yeah. That's very fascinating. Also, too, from the perspective of using both sides of the brain at both times,
Mm,
right? You're able to pivot back and forth between those based on whatever you're working with,
yeah.
which is that in and of itself is fascinating. And scientists have studied that for quite a while about people who are able to do that. Because a lot of times you have right brain people that are doing certain things, and you have left brain people that are just doing all these other things, right? So when you find someone who comes across the board who is able to mesh both sides together and work from both sides of it, it's a very cool thing. Are you familiar with an artist out of LA called, it goes by OG Abel?
OG Abel,
OG Abel.
a
Yeah.
musical artist or a
He's
visual?
a Chicano style
Oh,
artist. He does, I don't know if he does tattoos at this point or not. He may have stepped into it just a hair just because the industry blew up so big like it did through the earlier mid 2000s, but he draws with both hands and paints with both hands.
no.
So
Like
sometimes
independently or like in
he can
sync?
do it simultaneously
Wow,
and
that's
independently.
killer.
So it's wild. But he's an artist. He's got this stuff right here. These are two of his little prints.
Nice.
Yeah, it's very fascinating when I come across people who are working with both hands
Hmm.
and doing that, working with both sides of the brain. The
Yeah,
other
no,
thing that is
cool.
gonna, the other thing that I was gonna say that I can relate to is you mentioned a couple of times that you only graduated with 14 people. I only graduated with four people.
Nice.
And the fourth one was there only because one of the teachers who was my happened to be my mom at the time.
Nice.
She said to him, "Look, if the way that you're working here, we can put you on track to graduate with your friends here if you want to. You're just gonna have to work a little bit extra harder." And he did it. He worked extra hard and finished up and graduated with us, and he was a year behind us. And he's a good friend still to this day. But I understand that type of community scenario and being in that small environment.
Yeah, definitely.
Going into the high school with the classes and stuff that you had, was there thoughts at that point that, okay, I'm gonna go try and do the music thing first, or were you gonna go off and try and do the graphic stuff first?
Yeah, music was always the first and foremost. Like
Okay.
graphics was always like visual art was something that I knew I was just naturally good at and enjoyed doing, but was like, why would I do that when I can do music? So I started doing, I think I took one design class at the community college that I went to, Piedmont, Virginia Community College. And that class, I actually, it's funny, the first graphic design class that I took, I dropped out of it because my
Really?
brain was not ready for Apple computers. I was used to Windows and going
Okay.
from that to Apple. And also, I started community college when I was 14 because of the homeschool thing. Like I was able to start
Oh,
early
wow.
with it. So I think I was just like all around too young to fully comprehend Photoshop at the time when my brain wasn't used to that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, the irony is, yeah, I dropped out of my first graphic design class. So let that be inspiration for anybody out there. You can still make it. But dropped out of it, was like, I don't know if graphic design is the thing for me. And then at that point, really just kind of was like, all right, I want to do music. I'll buckle down to music. I'll do that. Went to Texas, worked with a ministry down there that was borderline occult, but you know what ministries in Texas aren't. So worked with the ministry in Texas, was like, I'm gonna be a worship leader. I'm gonna do music. It's gonna be great. And then after a year and a half of being down there, the last half a year, I traveled with some big Christian bands like the Newsboys and was
Okay.
doing production work with them.
Yeah.
And was like, I just want to actually play the music and not just be doing the stage work and production work.
Yeah.
And then after I left Texas, I was like, maybe I'm a little tired of the music thing. I already have my associate, so I may as well just finish my bachelor's in graphic design, get it done. My family was like, you got to get your degree, you got to get it done. So I was like, all right, fine, I'll finish the degree, I'll do that thing. And at
Yeah.
that point, I put music to the side and I was like, I like music and I want to do it, but I don't think I'm good enough to just do it quite yet
Okay.
without like proper training. I'm not quite good enough at it just on my own. And that's the thing is like visual arts have always been very natural for me. And music, I've always had to really fight for it, which for me makes it feel more worthwhile when like things actually start coming together with music. Because it's like I've put in hours fighting to make this happen, fighting to create something that I like and something that I am proud of putting out there. Whereas with design and art, like it's always been so easy to make the visual stuff. And it's just that's how my brain was for the longest time. And now I feel like I'm getting to the point with music where I'm like, I can really make something, sit down after 8 hours of producing, have a song that I'm like, this is pretty cool. This is pretty close to being done. And it didn't used to be like that. But anyways, getting back to college, did graphic design, got my bachelor's in graphic design, but learned far more from the agency in Arizona than I did from my actual university studying graphic design, which I feel like that's how most people are. Like once you get into the real world, once
Yeah.
you start seeing how like you actually use your skills
Yeah.
professionally, then you learn so much more. But I do love the foundation of the art degree. I love art history. I miss art history. I've been lately thinking that I want to start studying art history again and just like brush up on it, especially with Logo Lounge and talking about designs now. I really
Yeah.
should probably touch up on this so that I don't call something like brutalistic when it's actually like Bauhaus or something, and people be like, "You don't know what you're talking about." Yeah, loved school, loved learning that kind of thing, and yeah, coming out of college, did the agency in Arizona. And then when I moved back to Virginia, like I said earlier, I was like, I don't want to work at an agency anymore. I don't enjoy websites. They're not tactile enough. Like I want to experience the things I'm designing.
Yeah.
And found apparel design and was like, I really like this. I think I should give illustration and apparel a shot. Like, why not? So when I started No Go Stories, I did one website, and that website carried me over. And during the process of building that website, I was just illustrating every day, posting on Instagram every day, trying to just build something and grind away at it. And eventually it just started taking off. And this was the golden days, 2019 of Instagram before Reels had come, where everything was very visual, was still very just like standard picture based. I think they released the carousel like around that same time. And there was the repost accounts that would look for graphic design, find them,
Yeah.
repost them, and be like, this is a designer that made something cool. And then if you got enough of those reposts, then people would notice you. And then people notice you, then you could start building and have your brand. So honestly, I'll say a lot of my growth and success is a credit to a lot of those early repost accounts. And coming out of that like mindset is why I started doing Monday Motivation, which originally was just on my Instagram stories. Eventually started making them actual reels. And if you're not familiar with it, Monday Motivation is where I basically find inspiration originally on Instagram just from designers that I liked, put it into a reel, put it into a video, talk a little bit about each design and be like, I like this for this reason, and just promote positivity and connect the design community in an uplifting way. Because a lot of people critique design and be like, oh, look at this logo. It's wrong for these reasons. And I was
Right.
like, I just want to find good design and be like, hey, this is good design. This exists in the world, and I want you guys to be part of it. And I
Yeah.
want you guys to see this designer and to bring attention and to bring focus and to bring possibly more clients to this person that is really deserving of it. So that's how I got started with the Monday motivation and put it down for a while when I moved. And then this will be a nice segue into the Logo Lounge kind of thing. They I had a friend ask me if I wanted to submit some stuff to Logo Lounge, which, if you're also not familiar, Logo Lounge is a printed book that, as an artist, you can upload your design work to Logo Lounge. Then they'll put it through like a judging process to see if it is unique enough. I don't know exactly what the criteria are, but they'll have graphic designers look at the logos submitted, pick their favorites, and then those logos then eventually get published and printed into a book so that you can have a coffee table book of design inspiration that if you have family members that are like, you're a graphic designer, what does that mean? You can hold a book and open it up and be like, this right here, I made that. It's printed, it exists. Like I do things. Like I don't
Right.
just live on my computer. I actually make things.
Yeah.
So that's what Logo Lounge does. They create a book that is an inspiration-based book for designers by designers, more or less. So I put some stuff in the book, uploaded to Logo Lounge. They selected it. They contacted me and they were like, "We like your work. We like your consistency. We want to write an article about you in the book." And I was like, "That sounds great." So they were already a bit in contact in that kind of side. And this year, when the year started, they sent me an email and they were like, as somebody that's been more featured in the work with Logo Lounge, would you be able to like make a video just talking about Logo Lounge and how it's affected you? and impacted your design career. And I was like, I'll do you one better. What if we, hear me out, take Monday Motivation and combine it with Logo Lounge? And they were like, you don't have to go that crazy. I was like, no, but what if we did? And they were
Right.
like, actually, that could be really cool. So I had a call with them, call with the founder, made like a test video where like I went through Logo Lounge real quick, grabbed a couple pieces, and was like, ideally, I would find the recent uploads. Every week I'd go through the most recent uploads and feature my favorite ones from that. But made like a test video, a little pilot, sent it over to them. I was like, this is my pitch. They watched it and they were like, this is a great idea. Like, why haven't we done something like this earlier? And I was like, this would be so much fun. And like bringing Logo Launch, who already inspires people through logo work and through creating a design community with Monday Motivation, where I already try to create a positivity in the design community and just share things that inspire me and that I like so that other people can then be inspired by it. And they're like, we're sold, let's do it. So this last Monday, I published the second Monday Motivation video with Logo Lounge. And the plan is to do 8 of them, 2 months. We'll see how it goes, how it grows from there. And then we'll figure out if this is something that we want to keep going with. And ideally, it would be fun to represent Logo Lounge at things like Adobe Summit and CropCon and be able to show up and do also live
Yep.
inspirational kind of panels. I feel like that would be so fun. I love public speaking. I love acting. I love theater. I love all that. So I was like, this would just be perfect. And if I get to travel doing it,
Even
I'm
better.
I'm sold. I'm like, this could be incredible. Like when I pitched it to them, I was like, who knows if they'll go with this? But I was like, but the possibilities are really endless, and it really makes sense. And if it
Right.
works out, it'd be so cool.
Yeah.
So cross my fingers, hoping that it continues to be as good as it feels like it is, and continues to grow the way that it's growing. So it'll be
Yeah,
cool.
I think it will. I think it will. And the reason I'm saying that is because I'm already drawing lines back to your mindset early on in life. You getting instructions to do something and you saying, all right, what's the most obscure way that I can potentially do this so that I'm going to stand out? I'm also still adhering to what they're asking for, but I want to make it mine. I want to do it this way because you feel the value is there coming from you and you want to put your energy into it in a certain way, which is beautiful based off of the way you just described the pitch to them.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, I understand exactly what you're asking for, but what if we could do it this way? And sometimes I don't think creatives always take enough confidence in themselves
Mm,
to really push forward with the idea that they have and the vision that they see for the opportunity to get across that line with the person that they're pitching.
mm,
And I'm saying that because creatives have a completely different way of looking at the world. And a lot of times when you've got a client who's saying, this is what I want, this is what I'm trying to accomplish, they're just coming at it from one direction, right? Where a creative can come in and they can have a full broad spectrum approach to it and see all these different avenues of this is how it can be fanned out. And a lot of times that kind of quells the enthusiasm of the creative to the pitch where they're really confident in it, really passionate about putting it forward, and passionate being passionate with the idea that's in their head and what they're seeing the potential is for that client. Sometimes that gets squashed. I want to back up just a little bit because you said something was super fascinating to me. You went off to college at 14.
okay, it was community college, so it sounds more impressive than it is.
What, regardless, community college, whatever, you're
Yeah.
doing extracurricular stuff that most people are not doing
Yeah.
at age 14. And you said part of that was because you're being homeschooled. So, for those who are not familiar with homeschooling, is a situation where you can excel at your own rate of pace. If I'm not completely mistaken on that, I know with the schooling that we had, that was the scenario. It was we had a Becca book curriculum. I don't know if you're familiar with the Becca books, but we had that. So we had a certain number of little booklets that we had to complete in a for a year in a certain category of whether it was history or geometry or math or social studies, any of those types of things. So I'm familiar with the ability to excel, but yet you're doing this at 14. So from an outsider's perspective, it's almost, wait a second, 14, he's already taking college courses. There might be somewhat of a prodigy situation going on here that I'm seeing and might be tapping into that you're just glossing over and fast forwarding.
Yeah. It was a big part of my pride for a long time that I was the youngest in the room.
Okay.
And that was something that when I went to Texas, so a quick just like synopsis of it. I started community college when I was 14, got my associates when I was 16. So I got 2 years of college done by the time I was 16 from the community college. I then took off 2 years when I went to Texas. And then coming back from those 2 years, I was starting my junior year of college close to the same time that most people were. Like my identity of being the youngest in the room was starting to erode and was realizing that like maybe being the youngest isn't as big of a deal as I have always thought it was.
Right.
And of course, I feel like that's the baby of the family like thing, being like, oh, I'm the youngest of everything. Like my parents were the babies of their families, and they waited 10 years before they had my oldest sister. And when I was at any family reunion, everybody was in their 30s and I was 8 and had nothing to do because everybody was so much older than me. So I've always maybe felt like the outsider in that,
Okay.
but it was a big thing, like coming to grips with the fact that I'm not the youngest anymore, and now being 29 and being like, oh, I'm about to be 30. That feels weird as well. And it's just like the nature of growing up. Like you don't expect it's gonna catch up to you, and then eventually you do, and you're like, yeah, I guess I'm getting older, aren't I? But yeah, starting community college at 14 I thought it was like so cool. And then I realized that like I just had being homeschooled into then community college, having no perspective of what like the greater world was like from a public school standpoint, and like the community college being more or less my first exposure to a public school kind of
Yeah.
atmosphere was
Yeah.
also pretty jarring, and being like, oh, this is interesting, like how just people generally act and react to things and
Yeah.
live their lives is very different. And yeah, I didn't love school. It's ironic. I liked school and I liked learning and being creative, but I hated math and science. Maybe that's what it is. I
Yeah.
just hated math and science.
Same here.
So at some point, yeah, at some point, my mom was like, so going into community college, you could start with pre-calculus, but in order to do that, you have to do algebra half, algebra one, and algebra two condensed in 2 years. So you have to do this 3 years of curriculum in 2 years. Do you want to do that? And I was like, I hate math. If it means I can be done faster, then I'll be done faster. Which meant starting at 14, I was doing pre-calculus at the community college and just got pre-calculus done, and then was like, is that the last I have to take pre-calc one and two? Do I have to take any more math? And they were like, no, that's it. And I was like, thank God. I do
Oh,
not
wow.
want math anymore if I don't have to. So yeah, I hate math and science. Like I appreciated science, but I just my brain was like, why? When I
Yeah.
could create things, like why? Yeah, just not big in the culture, not culture, in the society developing spheres. I was like, I don't know if that's what I want to do. I'll do the creative things that society doesn't need, but builds culture. So it's
Yeah.
just where your priorities are,
No, for sure. Yeah, you're looking at it, especially the science part. You're looking at it like, why do I need to study what's created when I can go and create myself?
Yeah.
I get that level of it for sure.
And
The
now, like the irony is that like now I love watching sciencey videos and learning about maybe it's like my brain needed more time to develop and
yeah,
be okay with those kinds of things. But now I love watching like engineering stuff and like how things are built and learning about different like scientific discoveries and breakthroughs and astronomy and things. And it's so cool. But for whatever reason, as a kid, like it just didn't register in my brain. And now I'm older and I'm like, this stuff is so cool. Why didn't I like this? Yeah.
yeah. Again, this is fascinating, your story here. I'm glad we're getting to unpack this because it shows a trajectory of where your creative level is at and where it can be seen in your work, but it shows where it's come from. And what's fascinating too is the fact that you clearly stated you do not like math, but your mom put it to you like, listen, if you're going to this community college, you're going to have to do this pre-calc stuff. And in order to get there, you've got to do this and this prior to that, which once you started saying those words relating to math, I was
Yeah.
like, no, I stopped at multiplication and didn't go any farther. Like I couldn't figure it out. It made no sense to me.
I got like C's in all those classes. I don't think I got anything better than a C in my math classes, and it was like it was enough to pass.
Yeah,
And I'll get an A in literally every other class. But if math is the only thing that I get a C in, then I guess that's why my GPA four is perfect. So I think my GPA was 3.7 or 3.8 because of those C's. I was like, I want to be excellent at everything I do. And for whatever reason, I cannot be excellent at math. And that's fine. That's okay. That I embodied it. I was like, it's fine. I'm gonna get C in math. I'm gonna try really hard. And I tried really hard. I did tutors, I did everything to get better grades in math. I'm just not a calculus kind of person. And that's okay. That's okay.
for sure. But again, I don't want to gloss over the fact that you're doing this so young. That we'll move past it now, but
Okay.
I wanted to point that out. Going off to Texas at 16,
Yeah, and then I turned 17 like a couple months after I moved.
okay. When you went out there, were there people out there already that you knew, or was it going into unknown territory?
Completely unknown territory.
Okay, so even from a state cultural standpoint, you had a little bit of shock there, I would assume as well, slightly.
A little bit, a little bit. So the organization back in the day, there was a youth conference called Acquire the Fire that used to tour the country.
Okay,
And it was pitched, I think, in the early, like I think it started in the 80s, and they said it was MTV for like youth groups. So it was like
got
there's
you.
bands,
Okay,
there was acting, there was speakers, there was like all the different things that a conference would have, high energy
yeah,
for like youth groups and like kind of Christian church culture.
yeah,
I grew up going to these Acquire the Fire events and was like, these are awesome. Like the you have like hardcore and like metal Christian bands playing, and there's these theater skits that like have a cohesive like story across the entire 2 day weekend. This is like acting, which I love, and music, which I love, and performance all packaged up into one thing. And I loved it. So going to those as like a kid from probably middle school until high school, would go to 2 or 3 of those a year and knew that these Acquire the Fire conferences were awesome. And I wanted to do music like this and travel and do that kind of thing.
yeah.
And they had a leadership slash school of worship organization in Texas where it was based called Teen Mania. And I was like, when I finish high school, I want to go down to Texas and I want to do that because I want to tour and I want to act and I want to do music. So that
Okay,
was kind of like in my brain what everything of my life was building up to just getting to Texas and making it big through music through this youth conference kind of thing.
yeah,
So finally got to Texas and like having gone to Acquire the Fire for so much, I knew the culture and the experience and like what to expect from it in that. So going down, I didn't know anybody, didn't really have any grip of what the cultural shift would be. I just knew if I was going to this organization that was put on by Acquire the Fire or that puts on Acquire the Fire, then I'll fit right in. And I didn't feel like I had much culture shock from it. It was definitely a little bubble. Like it was out in Garden Valley, which is by Tyler, Texas, which is outside of
okay,
Dallas. So it's
okay,
like
yeah,
2
yeah,
hours outside, very small. I think Miranda Lambert is from there, fun fact,
okay,
but very like Christian bubble.
yeah,
And speaking of not having any exposure experience to other places, definitely was a very like cultivated experience. That is why I said it was like a cult because it was borderline like that.
yeah.
Some
I'm
other
with you.
stuff, I said it. But by the time I got down there, Teen Mania was on the rocks from some bad financial choices. So I was the last class to do their leadership program. And then Teen Mania tried to move from Garden Valley to Dallas and that didn't really happen. And at that point, I was preparing to be on the Acquire the Fire tour and was in the theater production. I was doing a lot of stage work and stuff like that. And we were canceled for the fall tour. And that's when they were like, we don't want you to go away because we don't want you to not come back. So we're going to put you on the Newsboys tour and you can tour with the Newsboys and just hang out with them for a fall tour. So did that, got to know them, great dudes. Still keep in contact with them when I go to Nashville, really solid guys. And
Cool.
then after that tour was done for the spring tour, they were like, all right, we're going to actually do the Choir of the Fire tour. We're going to make it happen. So I did it. I acted in that, had some kind of drama role, and then did the stage work. And then when that tour ended, they were like, we actually can't keep the ministry going anymore. So after 25, 30 years of doing this is the end. And I
Right.
was like, that's crazy. So I left and then they fired everybody. And
Oh,
it's
wow.
like my brain was expecting to finish high school, to go to Texas, and then to be a theater music star with the Choir of the Fire and tour. And that's how my life course was going to be. And
Yeah.
suddenly, the Choir of the Fire doesn't exist anymore. Teen Man doesn't exist anymore. And I was like, oh, what am I going to do with my life? This is what I was expecting to do. And that's when graphic design was like, hey, you're good at this. And I was like, oh yeah, I was pretty good at graphic design. Maybe I'll go back to school, get my bachelor's degree because I already had my associates. So I'll get my bachelor's degree in graphic design and go from there. And that's how the shift went from my life was going to be music and acting to I'll do graphic design instead.
And so when you come back, where do you decide to go to finish up? What
So I
program?
went to Liberty University,
Okay.
just staying in the when I was at the community college, everything was already set up for my degree to go to Liberty because my mom pretty much planned it out and was like, Liberty is a
Tailored.
good college. And I was like, I really don't care as long as I can just go do music.
Okay.
And when I got back, I was like, I really should probably go to JMU because JMU is a much better arts college.
Yeah.
But if I were to do that, I would have to take another extra year of college, and I'd just rather get it done. So I was like, whatever, I'll go to Liberty. Like at that time, their arts program was like it was all right. It
Mhm.
wasn't incredible. They're focusing way more into sports and that kind of thing at Liberty at the time. So like the arts program was all right. I was only there for 1 year, and then I finished my senior year online when I was in Arizona.
Yeah.
Yeah, did Liberty for a year. I was a junior at the time, so I didn't have to live on campus. So I didn't have to go through that whole thing, which I'd pretty much
Nice.
already living at the thing in Texas, pretty much already did like the living on campus
Yeah.
lifestyle. So I was like, I'm not really missing much because I've already done that in Texas, but luckily didn't have to stay on campus. I could stay off campus, could drive in. So I had the Liberty experience and really didn't have a Liberty experience at the same time and
Cool.
was only there for 1 year before I moved to Arizona.
Yeah.
Oh, so yeah, that was the time at Liberty, the 2 semesters that seem really obscure and a blip in the journey.
Yeah. Yeah. And just for the audience, people that are listening, JMU, that's James Madison University, correct?
Yeah, I think is it Williamsburg? It's not Williamsburg.
I believe so.
Yeah, in Virginia.
In that area. Yeah. My friend that I was telling you about that has the ad agency, he does a class there for the veterans, a marketing class for the veterans who are looking to start businesses and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then when you were saying liberty, the reason I'm trying to pull these things out is because I can relate to them, right? After completing high school for me, being in that private school, I went off to Pensacola Christian
Okay, cool.
in Pensacola, Florida.
Florida, Texas, the extreme places that you only find in Florida.
Exactly. Exactly. For sure. So we can relate on that cultish environment. That feel of what that experience entails. So you finish up, get your degree, and now you're headed out to Arizona.
So yeah, I moved to Arizona when I was still finishing my senior year.
Okay.
That was if you want to talk about a crazy life experience, if we want to talk about real crazy life experience,
Yeah, dive into it.
all right. When I was in Texas, I met a girl who was playing bass in the Acquire the Fire band. We talked, things didn't work out because I was on one tour, she was on another. I was like, we'll never see each other. And then also a caveat, when you're part of this ministry, you're not allowed to date because you're there for Jesus. So couldn't date anyways. Coming out of it, I was like, we could do something, we could start some kind of relationship, but it wouldn't work. So she eventually moved to Arizona when I moved back to Virginia. Didn't talk for a year or two. And then we started talking right right as I was finishing my first year at Liberty, so finishing my junior year. And I was like, yeah, you're still pretty cool. Why don't I just move out to Arizona? And she was like, really? And I was like, yeah, why not? Moved out to Arizona, got a job at the agency while I was still finishing my senior year. So I was, before that all started, had one summer of just, this is great. Life is great. You're really cool. We should get married. So we got married. Crazy, right? Got married, and then like a couple of weeks after we got married, like I started school again for my senior year, which is just an awful choice. Don't get married while you're still in school. Get out of school, get into the professional world, see how life changes, and then get married. It's crazy. So Christian life, I don't know why they decided that was a good idea. So moved to Arizona. After that summer, we got married, and then I started school full time, so a full 30 hours of schooling a week, while also working full time at this agency on 40 hours a week. So I was working so many hours and just didn't really have the time to put into this relationship that I should have had.
Yeah. As
Um,
a married man.
as a married man, absolutely crazy. I look back at it, I'm like, I was stupid. What the heck was I doing? So finishing school while working full time and then also trying to figure out what it was like to be married for the first time, and
Yeah.
just so many shifts and changes and so much schedule balancing, and I was not good at any of that. And eventually finished school, and then I think I had to take some summer classes to finish. And then a couple months after I graduated, we just realized like things were not working the way that they should. I We just couldn't put into the marriage what we thought we wanted to do. At the time we got married, we were both like, we want to tour and do music. We should do this. She started working at LA Fitness and was quickly becoming like a vice president and like
Oh,
working
wow.
into a higher role of the corporate kind of world. And she was like, there's no money in music. Why would we do that? I'm going this direction. And I was like, I still want to do music. And she was like, then I don't think that we're on the same page anymore, which I don't know if we ever were on the same page because we
Right.
rushed things so fast.
Yeah.
So ended up getting divorced, and that's when I moved back to Virginia and started No Ghost Stories.
Okay.
So that's the last crazy roller coaster moment where I really realized for the first time that like I can make bad choices that have really serious consequences. And that was a big like growing up moment of being like, oh, like I am 20, I think at that time I was 23. I'm 23 and divorced and just graduated school, wanted to do music and that failed. Have my degree in art now, don't want to do web design anymore. What the heck am I gonna do?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's when I found apparel design and was like, this is really cool. Like I can experience it, feel it, and get involved with this. So moving from Arizona back to Virginia, I moved to Charlottesville because I was like, I just need to be around people that I know
Yeah.
while I'm dealing with getting divorced. I tried to move to Nashville at that point. I was like, I'm gonna make music happen. Like things are failing. I'm at the bottom. I may as well just dig into music
Yeah.
and move down there and was there for a week or two, made no connections. Nobody wanted to talk to me. Like Nashville's, you have to have the clout and you have to have some kind of something
Okay.
established to make people want to get to know you and make people want to be interested in what you're doing, kind of like how LA is.
Yep.
And just had nothing and was like, maybe Nashville's not the place, not the time. So settled back down in Charlottesville and was like, this is where I need to be to just recover from a divorce and to get back into my creative space and to find out what I really want to do with my life. And always wanted to do music and never wanted to start my own illustration or graphic design business because when I put time into something, I want to put time into what I really want to do.
Yeah.
And it just worked out that the more I started doing the graphic design, the more it just naturally started building. I regret not taking more business classes in college, which is stupid that they didn't give you any.
Yeah.
Like it's not built into the graphic design program that you get
Not
business
at
classes.
all. Not at all.
Why? It makes no sense. So I just started doing the business thing, naturally started growing, and I still like also this year I'm like, all right, I really need to take some classes on business to like actually figure out some of the more like legal and technical things of running a business because I've just been figuring it out for the last 5, 6 years, and I feel like it works, but I should actually get more of the legal things actually ironed out and know how to run the business and know how to actually do these things. So
Right.
that's my design side of the journey is I need to actually continue to grow in this space and it's okay to figure it out. And it's okay to fail in business and continue to grow from it and learn from it.
one of the things I want to touch on, if you're comfortable with it,
Yeah.
what I'm saying that you experienced with the letdown of what you were doing in Techless. Then you turn around and you end up getting married, still at an early age, and that doesn't work out as well. So that's another letdown from a mental side of things. Do you feel comfortable, if you don't say so, but do you feel comfortable talking about the way that those things are a bit crushing on a
Yeah.
person?
Oh, they're so crushing.
Yeah,
Going from feeling like you're indestructible, which I feel like most people feel like in their teen years and early 20s, like I can do anything, I'm indestructible.
yeah,
And you hit the real world and you realize that you can try really hard and sometimes things just still don't work out. And it took a lot for me to figure out that like when you do crash that hard, you can still move on and it's possible to pick yourself back up. And at that point, community really is such a big factor. Moving back to Charlottesville, to my hometown after my divorce, and just needing to be around people that I knew and understood, I found this really cool artist community. That there was a house in downtown Charlottesville that was another kind of faith-based thing where they would have music nights and they would have studio space that you could paint in, record in, have pottery classes in. It was basically just a open house studio space that you could pay to be a member of and could just hang out with the people and be artists in community.
yeah,
And that was very helpful for me to not feel isolated. I feel like coming out of a lot of failure places, I had felt really isolated for a long time,
yeah,
especially moving to Arizona where I didn't know anybody except for one person. Felt very isolating. So then to move back to Charlottesville and find a community was very rejuvenating and felt like I could actually heal in a safer place and be around people and get to know my like creative side again and really push it. That organization was called the Farmhouse, and the Farmhouse was just a really good blessing to have that kind of space that I could pursue my creative endeavors with people that were also pursuing their creative endeavors and be around other artists that were also figuring it out and like probably was an early seed foundation for eventually what would become Monday Motivation and trying to connect the design community. But that was, yeah, that was a big part of my recovery and development of kind of dealing with loss and failure was finding a community. And it's easy to isolate, but
yeah,
being forced to not isolate. I got a house, I was renting a house a couple houses down from the farmhouse. So I was like very close. We'd often have nightcaps on the front porch, be hanging out, have family dinners and stuff like that. So it was really important to find that community. And since moving to Richmond, haven't really found that design community, which I wish that there was more of that here. Maybe it is. I'm just not finding it.
yeah,
But it's, yeah, community makes a big difference in the artistic journey, whether it's online doing things like this and talking to other designers and other artists,
yeah,
or if you can find it in your city. I'd love one-on-one person-to-person interactions. I'm a quality time person. So it grieves me that I haven't found that in Richmond, but I know it's out there. I just need to keep looking for it.
for sure. No, I appreciate you sharing that because I think that's very valuable information for the creative community, knowing that, okay, here's somebody else who's experienced some really abrupt halts in
Mm,
their hopes and dreams and just literally dead stop issues, right? To where you're thinking that you're on this path and it's going to be in this direction and it's going to be great. And then ultimately, eh, stops, dead stops. And you're like stunned. You're like, whoa, what just happened? This doesn't seem real, doesn't make sense. I'm not understanding why this is going on. And then it puts you in a bit of a tailspin. Then you have this other experience where you're literally getting married, and then ultimately that just doesn't work out for you because of the time constraints and then going in different directions and a career wise, and it just doesn't line up where staying together makes sense. And that makes you feel like, wait a second, what just happened here? This was supposed to be a great thing in my life, right? I think allowing that to be told to the creative community that life does happen and sometimes it happens to us abruptly. And being able to recover, as the title of this podcast is, artist recovery. It's not just necessarily about the traditional recovery of substance abuse or any of those types of things, but it's literally a recovery of the creative, who you are, from those letdown moments or those times when you end up struggling with depression, if it spins you out into that type of thing, or if that's something that's within you already, which for me, I've had that since I was a kid. But the recovery of being able to come out of that is a beautiful part of your story that I wanted to highlight. And I appreciate you sharing that and sharing that with the audience as well, so that they can see there's somebody else who's doing some pretty fantastic things in this moment, but you've also gone through some pretty tough things within your life as well. So thank you for that. Coming back from Nashville, that experience of not getting in. And I understand that, again, another touch point where I can connect with your life story. Both sides of my family, even though I'm in Michigan currently, both sides of my family is from Tennessee. So East Tennessee, Knoxville, all the way towards Rogersville, Kingsport area in that region. So growing up, I was always familiar with Nashville. I mean, that was the music capital other than Detroit. That's where that was. So I'm familiar with the closed network system that you have to try and infiltrate when you get there. And it's tough. It's very tough. I think Lainey Wilson spent 13 years
Mm.
before she's now getting the attention that she deserves. So it's tough on a creative in that environment. While you were there, did you see some elements of that apparel component come in, stick in your head then before coming back to the Virginia area? Or did you even see some of that out on tour with the Newsboys that kind of stuck in your head?
Yeah, where the apparel thing really came from, I think, when I was working with the agency in Arizona, they're called the Brand Smith Company. When I was working with Brand Smith, there was a couple clients that they're like, here's their logos, just put them on some shirts, make some apparel. So I just did some real quick, loose, nothing too breaking the wheel like designs. And they printed them and brought them in, and they're like, cool, here's the shirts. And that was my first time being like, oh, I made this. That's a really cool feeling. Like I made this design and now it's printed on a shirt. I kind of like that. So in the back of my head, I was like, I like apparel. This is something that I could get into. And then there was the only time this ever happened, I got an ad on Instagram for an apparel company, one of those like kind of small startups called In God We Must. And they had a shirt that said, Time ain't waiting for you. And it had a Grim Reaper with a clock and a sickle. And I didn't at that point understand that was like traditional Americana tattoo styling. I
Yeah.
just saw it was like, it's a skeleton. That's what is this? And first time I'd ever gotten it out on Instagram, immediately purchased it and then got it in the mail. And I was like, this is apparel. This is illustration. This is like gothic, but like happy gothic. I like this. What is this? And this was when I was before I was divorced and I got the shirt and my ex-wife was like, I don't know if I like that. And I was like, oh, I love this. This
Right.
is so cool. What is this? So coming out of everything in Arizona, I was like, I know I like apparel. I love this illustration style. I have to learn more about it. I have to figure out how to do this.
Yeah.
And that's when I started No Go Stores before it was called No Go Stores, just figuring out how to do apparel and that kind of thing. And everybody was getting iPads at the time and tablets and drawing. And I was like, I only have my laptop and I want this to feel hand done. And I found the pencil tool in Illustrator,
Okay.
and to this day, still just use my trackpad and the pencil tool. I don't use an iPad. I don't use anything. I draw everything with my fingers and the trackpad and the pencil tool in Illustrator. And that's how
Nice.
I make everything. And it feels hand done because it has the roughness of the pencil tool, not the pen tool where you can make it perfect.
Yep.
It has that roughness, so it gives it a hand drawn vibe while still being completely digital. So finding that natural expression through the what I'd eventually figure out was traditional Japanese and Americana tattoo style. I was like, I like this because it feels real, it feels authentic, it has a heritage to it. When people see it, it feels in a strange comparison like Greek architecture. Like we see that in, like the
Yes.
pillars and columns and the scroll work and everything. Like it feels established and like it has a history to it.
Yeah.
Loved that natural, organic feel and the hand done feel, and really just delved into that and figured out how to illustrate in that style. It took me probably 2 or 3 years before I feel like I finally figured out how to actually do the styling the way I want to. I tried the halftone stuff and was like, this is too perfect. It
Okay.
feels too organized. I don't want to do halftone. Tried it for a while. I was like, maybe that's not for me. And then really just dug into the inky rounded corners and that rough, edgy, like nothing is perfect, like intentional imperfections to make the design feel more organic and more natural and
Yeah.
more hand drawn.
Yeah.
And bringing that all together and being like, I like apparel, I should design this for apparel. And then it just grew from there. I was at a friend's house just recording something, and he tagged me in the video, and a youth pastor friend of his saw me tagged in the video and was like, oh, this guy also does graphic design. And he was like, could you design some stuff for my youth group? And I was like, here I am back in the Christian world again. Okay, why not? So
Right.
I got into the kind of Christian side of apparel and the religious side of designing apparel. And it's a hard corner of design to be in because either everybody's done it a million times or it's sacrilegious. So
Yes.
finding this like line right in the middle where it's notably recognizable in the themes and tropes, but just different enough that it's not sacrilegious. It's
Yeah.
a very tough line to walk. And
Yeah.
because of what we've talked about with my like backdoor approach to designing, I
Yeah.
found
Yeah.
it. And I was like, oh, I can really like capitalize on making what is generally very boring and over what is it like overtrodden, like finding a unique way of displaying religious kind of imagery, and just found a niche in that kind of space and got really good at it while mixing that with the Americana and traditional kind of tattoo style, which is probably where it really found its unique flair, is people weren't really doing that in a religious
Right.
nature.
Yeah.
And it just grew from there and started his youth pastor friends saw it and they reached out to me, and then that started getting more attention and growing more on Instagram and posting their kind of stuff. Got really good at making mock-ups in Photoshop to make it look like the designs that I was making were actually being printed, and
Yeah.
fooled a lot of people into thinking that people were printing more of my work than they probably really were, and
Right.
allowed people to see that my designs do look good on apparel.
Yeah.
And then it just spiraled from there and kept growing and growing. And at some point, I got a message from a woman named Daisy, and she was like, hey, I work with a country artist. Would you be interested in working with them, doing some design work for them? And I was like, sure. And she was like, cool, let's set up a call and talk about it. And I was like, weird. Usually people just tell me who it is. So I was like, maybe it's somebody that's a big deal. Why not? So I had the call with her, and she was like, okay, so the artist is Morgan Wallen. And at that point, I still don't listen to country very often. I was just
Okay.
like,
Yeah.
okay. And she he's like pretty much the biggest country artist like rising right now. And
Yes.
I was like, cool. And she was like, he's also been in kind of some hot water for some like bad publicity stuff. And I was like,
All
okay.
right.
And she was like,
I don't know what you're
but
talking
he's
about.
working, but he's working on it. He's gone to rehab. He wrote a song as an apology, like to his mom and to people. Like he's like making the steps to being a better person and is like showing that he is a good person and everybody loves him that knows him. It's just he had some bad publicity stuff. And I
Yeah.
was like, if he's working on himself and he's making an effort to be a better person and he rose really fast into fame, and it takes a lot to figure out how to navigate fame when you're
Yeah.
new to it. I was like, if he's working on himself, why not? And she was like, oh, I'm so glad that you're on board because I've talked to a few designers and they've flat out said I'll never work with that guy. And I was
Really?
like,
Wow.
well, I'll work with him. And she was like, great. And then I did a bunch of projects for Morgan Wallen. I designed all of the apparel for his Dangerous tour, except for a few designs that they were still running from before they hired me. And that was my foot into the country world. And then
Nice.
from there, Ernest, who also works a lot with Morgan Wallen, worked with Ernest.
Yeah.
And then Red Star Management, who started doing work for Dave Matthews, who's from Charlottesville, started doing work for Dave Matthews years ago,
Yeah.
contacted me and they're like, hey, would you be interested in doing some work for Chris Stapleton? And I was like, why not? So I showed them my process and they were like, cool, let's do it. Did some work for them, did some work for Dave Matthews Band, but I don't think they used any of the designs I made. I think they changed directions for what they wanted to do visually, and my style just didn't quite match.
Yeah.
But technically, I've worked for Dave Matthews, but I can't share any of the stuff because
Contract, that
yeah,
business side of things.
yeah, business. Oh gosh, why do we have to have business? But yeah, that was my then foot into the country world, and at some point, I did some design that had a slight Japanese flair to it, and Tatami Jiu-Jitsu hit me up, and they were like, "Hey, do you do Japanese stuff?" And I was like, yeah, I've never done it before, but I like it. I would love to do it. And they're like,
I,
cool, let's do some projects. And then they've been one of my most consistent clients now for the last 3 or so years. Like every year I can expect to do at least two flash sheets and a few illustrations for them. And they've just been a great consistent client. So then because of the Japanese traditional and the Americana traditional, I now have jujitsu clients and country clients, and it's a weird dichotomy, but
yeah.
somehow they both fit into that traditional kind of realm. And that's how I've used the tattoo style to grow my business to the way that it is.
Yeah, it's again fascinating. And I'm drawing back to that kid who was told, this is the way I want you to do it. And you're instantaneously in that mindset of, all right, I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it my way and go at it from this angle. But also, too, I want people to be aware of the element of you being willing to work with somebody who you didn't really know a whole lot about in terms of what was going on in the landscape of the music scene and news media, because the that has a tendency to get blown out of proportion real fast, real quick. But being from the background that you have, there wasn't a real knowledge base that could support the phone call prior to. And then when you're presented with the opportunity to work with somebody where all of these other creatives just flat out said, no way, it's not happening. We'll never work with that guy. But you showed grace through what that manager was telling you about his storyline, right? And you're like, yeah, but I'm willing to give this a try and give this a go.
Yeah.
You could see that he's potentially doing something to try and better himself. And you're like, yeah, let me give this a shot. But just showing that grace and being willing to not necessarily just buy into the media, even though you didn't really know a whole lot about the story. But I'm sure after the fact, you're like, wait, let me go check this out. But those are the opportunities that get presented that a lot of times will propel you farther than where you may even think you're going to begin with. And if you just abruptly shut that down immediately, there's a potential that you don't end up getting to go in a direction that you really want to. And I think that's a cool element of your story that needs to be highlighted for the listeners and everybody that's paying attention to this interview is that sometimes an opportunity will present itself out of the blue that is a thing that changes the direction of where you're going. And if you're not at least a little bit open to the possibility of it, it could abruptly cancel everything. And that was a propellant to you being able to move forward with these new styles that you're delving into and feeling that, okay, this is where I can create my own lane and carve out my own space with these styles. Also, just the fact that you're drawing with your trackpad, that in and of itself, again, takes me back to that brain that you've got that's working both sides of the skull, right?
Mhm.
There's a unique ability there as well, being able to do that. Because for me personally, I it took me quite a while going from pencil and paper to start doing stuff in Illustrator because I couldn't, it felt completely disconnected for me. I couldn't get the same feel that I was trying to get with what I was creating with a pencil. To, again, just highlight some key things about you that is very unique and fascinating for me is as a fellow artist and somebody who's a fan of what you've been doing is that these abilities that you have to think differently, think outside of the box, using both sides of your brain. And that can be even developed too. So if there's somebody out there listening and you want to expand your range, if you're a
Mhm.
right-handed person, start practicing with your left hand and watch what happens
Yeah.
after 6 or 7 weeks of doing that. Watch
Yeah.
what happens. Just try it. I'm just going to throw it out there. You try it on your own.
Yeah. It's the limitations, I think, is what people often get caught up on is they think that limitations inhibit, whereas I think that limitations in using the tools that you have actually focuses. So I didn't have an iPad, and
Yeah.
getting started with what I'm doing, I could have easily said, I don't have an iPad, I can't be an illustrator. But I saw I have a laptop that has a trackpad that has a pencil tool. That's very non-conventional. I'm going to do it. And I figured it out. And I figured out how to make that work for me. And it just comes back to it's okay to have limitations. Like, limitations shouldn't stop you, it should allow you to then explore everything you can do in that space. I always compare it to Legos. Everything goes back to Legos, right?
Yeah, for
Love
sure.
Legos and building Legos now with my nephews. And they were always like, how are you so good at building with Legos? And I was like, I'm choosing to only build with black and yellow pieces. And by not allowing myself to have all of these Lego pieces to work with only black and yellow pieces, it means I have to be very creative about the way I'm using these black and yellow pieces. And I can't use other colors. I have to only use the colors that I've chosen for myself. And
Right.
like applying those limitations allows me to find new ways of using the pieces that wouldn't have been used before because maybe you would have just been like, oh, I can do this with this piece instead, but it forces you to be more creative and to look at the problem from different angles and to find different solutions. Don't let limitations hold you back. If you want to do something, use what you have and just find out how you can do it as best as you can with the limited tools that you have, and you'll get there in the long run. Don't let the lack keep you back from the passion that you have.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. It's that was beautifully said because that is exactly what creatives need to have in the forefront of their mind on a continuous basis as much as possible. If they can keep that thought process at the forefront of their mind, then they'll be able to do more and find more opportunity as well because they're not just confined to one specific thing. That's great. With doing the work with the Nashville connections and touching base with that industry and that community, where did the Sullen Art Collective collaboration come into play and how did that connection form? Because that's a completely different region of the country, realistically, right?
Yeah. Sullen was a project that they asked me if I could do some illustration work. Sullen very much so emphasizes the tattoo styling, both Japanese and Americana. So because of the work that I was doing in both of those spaces, they hired me to do some work. I don't know if they ever printed any of my work actually thinking about it, but it was a project early on in my like figuring out how to do the Japanese and Americana styling. And that was, yeah, that was just a one-off project where they hit me up. They're like, "Would you be interested?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's do a project." Did some work, sent it off to them, got paid, and that was it. So the Solid one is maybe a bit more anticlimactic, but you brought up Nashville again, and this will be my last kind of thought on the Nashville thing. I mentioned before going to Nashville post-divorce and feeling like I had nothing to put out there, nobody wanted to talk to me.
Yeah.
And that left Nashville with a pretty bad taste in my mouth. I was like, oh, that kind of sucks. Like when I was on tour with the Newsboys before we'd stopped through Nashville a couple times, my friends on the Newsboys tour showed me their friends in Nashville and it was very interconnected. Everybody was very positive. It was fun. And then
Yeah.
going to Nashville and like nobody wanting anything to do with me was so jarring that I was like, oh, that like maybe Nashville's not as cool as I thought it was. And then flash forward 2, 3 years when I did the project with Morgan Wallen, they got me 2 tickets to go see him in Nashville. And going back to Nashville with my presence that I built on Instagram with my graphic design profile on Instagram, I told some people, I put on my stories, I was like, hey, I'm going to be in Nashville. Does anybody want to meet up? And the overwhelming amount of people that wanted to meet me going back to Nashville with like graphic design basis, like not music, but with graphic design, and being like, oh my gosh, people really still do care. Like people are interested. And yes, on one side, it's like I had the clout because I had the following on Instagram, which at that time it was probably like only 12,000 people. So not like crazy huge, but like enough that like enough people that followed me that were also in Nashville were like, yeah, let's totally meet up. Let's do this thing. And it was really like nice to be able to go back and be like, oh, like I was fighting so hard to find people.
Yeah.
I should have just been focusing on my passion and let my passion create the space for me to then find the people. It was
Right.
like interesting. Like I didn't have to prove myself verbally. I just let my work speak for myself. And then people were excited to meet me and to hang out because
Because of your work.
I put the work into it. Exactly.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it was a cool, like, very satisfying experience that then redeemed Nashville for me. Like, now I love Nashville. I'm like, oh yeah, it is a good place. You gotta be willing to put in the work and then to show up and to just be a positive person, and people react to that.
For sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. The elements of where you're at right now, we started off the conversation a little bit with the music stuff, shifting into that feeling like you're wanting to be able to do a little bit more of that at this point in time. What does that look like for you? Do you have a plan in place, or is it, you know what, I'm just gonna start creating some stuff and see what happens?
Yeah, over the last 5 years, while I've been building my graphic design business, I've been learning Logic. It started like most people in GarageBand, learning how to do stuff, and then got to the point where I was like, I need to actually learn how to mix and master, and I can't do that in GarageBand. So upgraded to Logic and have been making just music when I can in my spare time and recording and learning production over the last 5, 6 years now. And I'm at the point where I like the stuff I'm making, and I'm like, this has a good sound to it, a good feel. I found kind of chill house music, Afro house vibes, and was like, I really like this underground UK kind of stripped back electronic music. How can I now bring my violin and my electric guitar into this space? And have met great vocalists over the years and working with different people and people from school that I still stay in contact with. They're great singers and great musicians. And I just love the fact that the music community is also now becoming more collaborative. And for me, for a long time, it was like the music community, like, I want to do music, you do music, let's do music together. And people would be like, no. And I was like, why are you so just like walls up immediately? Like, why are musicians this way? And then graphic design being like, oh, I like what you did. And people would be like, thanks, man, I like what you did. And being like, we're just a hug. Like this community is so welcoming and
Yeah,
graphic design is so awesome because if you make something that looks good and somebody else makes something that looks good, you're like, this is cool. But for some reason in music, everybody seems to think that it's okay to be like, your music sucks. And I'm like, based on what? Like, what
exactly.
experience do you have that you can tell me my music is bad when you don't even make music? So it's like, I've found this weird difference between how people react to music creators versus visual arts creators. And
Yeah,
it's been something that I've always dreaded and been like, I want to get back into music, but people are so volatile in music. And like anything, it's just finding the right people that you can collaborate with that are excited to make music and excited to do the things. And still, I feel like there's more vocal haters to the music side than there is to the arts and design side. But I don't know. I feel like at this point, I've learned that it's okay to just make what you want to make. And if you like it and it's good, then you like it and it's good and people react to it and will want to invest in it if they like it. And if they don't like it, then you can ignore those people and it's fine. As long as you believe in what you're doing and you like what you're doing and you do the research and you make sure it is good. I don't know. You got to be able to self-critique and be like, this isn't quite there yet. I don't like this.
yeah,
But balance it to the other kind of music that you do and take inspiration from that and draw inspiration and try to emulate the sound. And in the process of emulation and adaptation, you start to find your own voice in it and your own expression and go from there. It's okay to start off by copying things and then to develop it into something that's new and different. In my art classes growing up, I was drawing something and somebody else was drawing something beside me and they were copying me. And somebody was like, hey, they're copying this person. And the art teacher was like, it's okay. It just means that they're inspired by this person and they want to try out what they're doing. This isn't, you're in middle school. This isn't going, you're not going to get published in a copy what somebody else is doing. Even if it's in art, like you're drawing it and they're drawing it, it's going to be different. It's not going to be the exact same.
Yeah.
Just try it, see if you like it, and then start to make it your own. So I think that there's a certain amount of learning by copying and learning by doing in any kind of form of creative space where like you can't just pick up a pencil and be good at something new immediately. Like you have to try out the different spaces and you have to just get it done. My mom always said it's better to have a short pencil than a long eraser. Like it's always better to try and to sharpen the pencil and try and sharpen the pencil and the pencil goes down and to erase and to keep going than it is to just have a bunch of eraser left and be like, I didn't try, so I didn't fail, so it's okay.
Yeah.
I see how you like it. I tried halftones and realized halftones aren't for me, but I wouldn't have known if I didn't try. So as an artist, it's okay to try, it's okay to fail, and just continue to be aware and learn from it and figure out what works for you and what doesn't work for you. I tried out websites and I did not like doing websites, but some people really do doing websites. And then in the end, it's like the kind of work you want to do is the work that you put out. So if I wanted to do business cards, I shouldn't be posting websites. I should be posting business cards. If I want to be doing posters, I shouldn't be like designing packaging. I should be designing posters and showing people posters.
Yeah.
And you're never going to break out of the mold or the path that you're on if you don't show people that you have the potential to do something else. And that's why when I started posting illustration work while I was still doing web design, I was like, I don't want to do websites anymore. I'm just going to start posting illustrations and posting mock-ups of my designs on shirts and show people this is what I do. And then lo and behold, youth pastor eventually hit me up and was like, let's design some apparel. And then it went from there. So put out what you want to do. You'll get what you give. Put out the good vibes. You'll get the good vibes. Put out the good energy. You'll get the good clients.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's the thing too with the music industry. The landscape has changed so
Mhm.
much over the last 10 years, y- probably even the last 5 years, 8 to 5 years.
It's free.
Um, yeah, if you do exactly what you did with your apparel illustration concept, right? You just do this, you create this, you're going in the way that you want to go with the style and feel that you want, it's comfortable for you. You just put it out there, right?
Yep.
And then that second opportunity going back to Nashville, you had this huge acceptance and welcoming experience, right? Just by putting it out, hey, anybody want to connect? I'm going to be in town. I think if you do that same approach with the music that you're creating, because I've listened to some of it, I did listen to quite a bit of it last night, even just before today, just because I wanted to feel into it some more. And you have what it takes. I'm just telling you, just from people that I've worked with, you have what it takes. You have an approach that is different in a sense. There's elements where, yes, it can say it can fit over here or it can fit over there, but it's not John Bannon, right? Your thing is your thing.
Yep.
And I can see that. I can sense that. And I just want to keep encouraging you to stick with that same approach of the way that you approached your illustration for the apparel stuff. You're doing it this way. You're going to put it out there, and the people that need to be attracted to it are going to be attracted to it. And I guarantee you, people are going to be attracted to it. Once you start putting it in the mix on a regular basis, it's just going to take place organically.
Yep.
And because of that, too, because of again, you're working with two sides of the brain at once. You're musically inclined to begin with because you've studied and worked with these other instruments, right? You're not just one instrument player.
Yeah.
That ability to be able to incorporate a lot of those instrumentations without having to hire somebody to come in, unless you feel, you know what, I need somebody else's flavor on this. So I do need to hire somebody for this particular instrument. So let me do that. But everything else, you controlling the formation of it, that, excuse me, that in and of itself allows you to bypass some of that business type stuff that'll come into play when it talks when you end up with publishing issues and different things like that because you're doing it all and keeping all the money, so to speak.
Yeah,
That's going to allow you to project out even farther. That's one of the things that Kid Rock did early on with what he was doing was at first he didn't know how to play all those instruments, but he started learning how to play all those instruments and then started to incorporate those into when he's writing a song. And he figured out, okay, if I don't have to hire all these people in, I can keep more of the money. I can make this more all me. And then two, he took those abilities of learning those different instruments, and then he incorporated that into his stage production, right? At certain points in the concert, he would go around and play every single instrument
it's
through
cool.
a period of time, right?
Yeah,
Just to show, hey, I'm not just up here singing, I can also play. I can
hmm
also do all these other things. So I'm not just a single-minded artist. I can do multiple things, which again is going to be beautiful for you as well, because you already have ideas and concepts, I'm sure, of how you want your merch to look,
for sure.
which then in and of itself is another avenue of revenue stream. So I'm looking forward to what you're doing and how it's going to evolve just because being a fan already and now finding out, all right, there's more to you even so than just the illustrative component. You're doing some music. So there's that I can vibe into. It's cool. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be nice just sitting on the sideline, so to speak, and watching where your next move is, where you're going, all that kind of stuff. Let's funnel back around to the logo lounge opportunity here. You touched on it a little bit early on, and I tried to steer you back to your life story, but now we can,
All right, I've been a little all over the place.
yeah, we can steer back to the logo lounge scenario now. Do you have some thoughts of how you see that playing out to even expand on what your initial pitch was?
I think what I've mentioned before, like the potential possibility of doing more in the kind of a public speaking kind of space.
Yeah,
Hate to say being like a public figure because it feels weird, but
yeah,
like moving into that like a face that can represent the inspirational side of the design community. Would love to be able to, if the work with Logo Lounge does develop the way that I hope it does, be able to go to these like conferences and design things and be
yeah,
able to speak at them and to
yeah,
show up. It's something I've been wanting to do for a long time. And I see a lot of other designers go to CropCon, Adobe Summit, those kinds of places, and interacting with the other designers and getting to know them and hanging out and talking. And I'm like, that seems fun. Why am I not doing this? Like hanging out with people and talking design. I love doing that. I need to do this more. So
right.
if things go well with Logo Lounge, the way I feel like they are, I think it'll be great to be able to develop into that kind of more of a live space, be an MC. With my call with them, they were like, we can easily see you becoming like a spokesperson for Logo Lounge. And I was like, I like the way that sounds, and that feels very in line with the way that I've been trying to intentionally build the graphic design community and build a positive attitude towards reviewing people's work and drawing attention to work that deserves to have more attention drawn to it.
Yeah, for sure. That'd be cool. That'd be cool, man. And again, I like drawing, putting pins and stuff, and then stringing yarn back and forth throughout a timeline. And I see this as another element of you wanting to be a part of that touring community from Texas that's going around, being part of that theatrical production element, right? You being able to step into kind of that role as a single source individual and in that space, putting you back on stage. Same thing with your music. It's like a circle effect of putting you back into a place where you thought at one point in time there's this huge abrupt stop to that dream and that opportunity. And now you've got these things that are coming to the surface that are potentially going to propel you into that in this realm rather than that realm.
Yeah.
And I see those as just for the vernacular of what we're talking about in this conversation, those are God moments. That stopped because that direction at that point in time was not supposed to take place.
Yeah.
But where you've come and where you've grown into this moment in time is providing these opportunities that can potentially be the same type situation, except in something that's more suited for John Bannon.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost
That,
like a
that,
second.
yeah, exactly. That's how I'm seeing it and how it's played out for me in your storyline here, which is it's very cool and it's very inspiring for others as well. And I think if they can pull some of that out of this conversation, it's the fact that don't let the opportunities that feel soul crushing stop you.
Yeah.
Continue on
It's good.
because you may potentially get to somewhere that's far beyond that thing that you thought you wanted.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
thing you thought you wanted was going to be the ultimate end all be all that got shut down completely. Like literally, the whole tour stopped. Everybody got fired off. We had to let everybody go. It's done, over with, ended. It didn't just get halted for a year, it just ended. But if creatives are able to push past those types of things that take place, is heartbreaking as they are and defeating and frustrating,
Mm.
if you're able to push past them and look at them from the perspective of maybe it just wasn't the right timing for me to
Yeah.
be in that environment, maybe it's just not the right environment for me to be in completely at all. There's possibilities that will arise down
Yeah.
the road that may be more aligned with your soul and what your heart is set wanting and what your heart feels joyful with that take you farther than,
Definitely.
than what you thought, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm seeing. And that's what I hope is the case for you.
Yeah. No, that's very well put. A very good way to wrap it all up and to tie it all together.
Yeah, yeah. So with that, just a constant reminder that I always want to put out there for the creative world, and that is to always listen to your heart and be kind to your mind.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.